Hello, everyone. I'm Chelsea Kiani, and I'm going to be talking to you about the impact of the threat of divorce on a marriage. And the book that I chose for this presentation is Before a Bad Goodbye: How to Turn Your Marriage Around by Dr. Tim Clinton. And throughout this book, Dr. Clinton first gives various scenarios of couples who are in bad times or those who are contemplating divorce. One thing Clinton proposes first in all of his work is how pain closes the spirit. Closed spirits, as he suggests, often assign evil motives to perfectly innocent acts and blind us to love and to intimate relationships. He also talks about that by the time a couple reaches the counseling office, each spouse is usually exhausted, they're frustrated, they're empty, they feel so many emotions, and that loneliness has already been a part of their marriage for a while before they even reach the counseling office. A lot of questions that you're going to see with those who are either contemplating divorce, those who've already decided to get divorced, or those who are just going through the beginning stages of those trials and are trying to find a way to work it out. When they enter the office, you're going to be bombarded with so many questions, so many thoughts and states that people are going to be in. For instance, a lot may ask the question, can our love be saved? Others are just hanging on, waiting for that glimmer of hope that they're hoping that they can find by going to counseling. Some just want to let go altogether, and some do. Other questions you might get are, why, Lord, did this happen to me? I thought we loved each other. I don't see how this could have happened. And as he goes through certain questions and different scenarios, you will see Dr. Clinton gives various scenarios of people that he's worked with, and through each of those situations and through his work, he discusses how a lot of people during the time of divorce, or those who are threatening to get a divorce on their marriage, there are a lot of emotions taking place, such as confusion, anger, pain, loneliness. And emotions play a big part in the threat of divorce in a marriage, because in this time people are going through so many hurts, so many questions, much pain. um, their emotions are very heightened, and it's very important to address those emotions that people are experiencing and get them out in the open. And so let's just talk about a few of these various emotions for a minute. uh, for instance, when in the state of confusion, there's a lot of questioning happening, like, I really thought we loved each other. How can people be so hurtful? When did this happen? I didn't see this coming. So many questions that could be asked. And the first thing that Clinton wants one to recognize is, if you are a Christian, for example, everything you are going through right now will work together for your good, as we see in Romans 8:28. Realizing that God's hand is in it, no matter what you're going through. That's hard to say, but he's saying, it is very important for us to realize that God's hand is in it. That doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. In fact, it may mean that it's probably going to be hard. It's going to take some hard work and some time, put into it. But we can be sure that He is near, working things out despite our actions, always for His purposes. Another one of God's purposes is to reveal Himself to others through you, including your friends, spouse, children, and others you're acquainted with. Even in the midst of your trial, remember in 2 Corinthians 1 3 through 5, where He'll be reflected both in the grace you display while you work your way through it, and in the eventual comfort you'll give others because of the comfort He gives you. During your time of confusion, just remember that God is working. He is working constantly, and He is our continual help in our time of trouble, as we see in Psalms 46:1. Also, when those who come into the office, not only are they going through states of confusion, there's also a lot of anger. Anger is very, very common in relationships that are on the rocks, and struggles that people are going through, and those who are thinking about divorce. Um, But however, in the counseling office, you need to remember that it is not your job or in the best interest of either of the couples to try to get rid of the anger, because majority of the time, anger cannot be completely healed. It is a process. It does take time, and there's so many different facets and different angles from which anger comes from, during those who are thinking about divorce. However, it is important to not allow this God-given emotion to overtake you or lead you down a sinful path. Um, in Ephesians 4:26, it tells us that we can be angry and yet not sin. If you do not let your anger get out of control, or if you do let it get out of control, there may be consequences that you're not prepared to deal with. Um, when people are in pain, though, it's very hard for them to let go of that anger. So it is very important to address that anger and know that it is there. And those who are in pain also, it comes from so many different angles. Pain, it can be in so many different forms, whether it's the pain of rejection, injustice, watching your marriage die, betrayal, abandonment, or just the prospect of being alone. And some responses to these emotions that should be taken um, by not only the counselor but the individual in these states. This is ways in which that response to those emotions and those things that are happening in them should be taking place. For instance, as we've already stated, in the state of confusion, it is so important to realize that God is in it. That His hand is leading you, that He is guiding you, despite the trial that you are in. We have to understand that He is continually working. In the case of anger, um, we have to learn that it is okay to be angry, just not to act on it. Um, One way to do this is to consider the source and empathize with those you're angry with. Think about those who you're angry with, because a lot of times um, the very pain that you're going through and you're angry for them for they can be in just as much pain as you. So look around to the world that you're in. Perhaps the stress that you've gone through and that both of you are going through is clouding your judgment, and all you can see is that anger. But it helps to step back and look at the entire situation, because anger begins to dissolve with understanding, and with understanding comes time and willingness to want to understand it. Some other suggestions that Clinton gives is make a list. Make a list of all those good things. Make a list of all those bad things. And remember those in times when all you want to do is be vengeful, but remember that list that you made. And not only that, get confident in God. In Romans 12:17-19 says to repay no evil for evil. Anger is an emotion that demands change. So once you're confident in God and confident that God is working in your life, regardless of the circumstances you're in, you're going to be willing to change, and you're going to realize that God is taking care of you no matter what. Um, because if He is for you, then who can be against you? Another important aspect of anger is to discuss it. Uh, you need to address it. It is very important to get it out in the open. And lastly, remember that we're called to love and to prayer. And in dealing with pain, accepting it is very important. You know, uh, be willing to forgive even in the midst of your pain. The worst thing to do in these situations and in those who are contemplating divorce is trying to hide and cover up the pain. But Clinton discusses what he calls removing the mask. He said a lot of us live lives through mask. And in these types of situations, removing that mask is very essential in getting down to where you can work and move past this. Certain counseling tips or suggestions that Clinton goes through for those who are thinking about divorce and wanting to try to turn their relationship around is recognize the future that's ahead of you. If your marriage is truly in trouble, The best course is to admit it and begin to determine what to do about it. Regardless of what you might think, there are not that many choices, and it's actually not that very complex. It's actually very simple. He discusses in his book, in one of his chapters, he calls it a room without exits, which means stepping back to look at the relationship, but not stepping out of the relationship. So if you look at it as, I'm not trying to get out of this, but I'm willing to work through this, then you can go somewhere from there. And he gives 3 options that a couple has when contemplating the threat of divorce on their marriage. Is either divorce, you get a divorce, you live in name only, or you choose the staying power and the power of staying. And in the case of divorced, when those who do decide to get divorced, there's so many things that come along with that. There's the cost of it in general, the scars of parents, the scars on each spouse, the scars on children, on the family as a whole, the change, the starting over process. So many facets that go along with the actual act of divorce happening. In name only means deciding to just deal with the pain instead of leaving or trying to fix it. Uh, you know, in name only means, yeah, I know that we're not the happiest, but I'm willing to just stay here and be with them because I have no other option. And that's really not an answer, to fixing the trials and struggles that y'all go through either. His last step is learning the staying power and the power of staying. The power of staying is meaning that you choose to make it work by working through the problems. You are making the choice to stay and stick this out, and that you're going to work this out because it is important, because marriage is a gift from God, and you are choosing that option. And after working through all of this pain and going through all of these options, and after deciding to turn your marriage around, you have already actually been working on it. When you've recognized your emotions, when you've realized your options and decided that I'm going to try to make this work, I'm going to work through this, you've already begun that journey to working on it, working through your relationship with one another. And tips and counseling tips or helps from this point forward on your journey in trying to turn your marriage around um, can be a vast majority of tips, but I'm just going to list a few for you. Is forgive one another. Forgiveness is extremely, extremely important in the case of those who have been hurt, those who feel like they've been wronged. Um, Learning to forgive one another. Uh, Also, empathize with each other, trying to understand who you are today. When you got married, you probably more likely were very different people than you are at this moment in your life. So, trying to understand who you are at this point in your life. Talk about the hurts. Ask for forgiveness. Not only learning to forgive, but ask for the forgiveness. Making the choice to love again. Define and accept the purpose for your marriage. What has God called you both to do? What is the purpose of your marriage together? Learn to undress emotionally, which Clinton talks about, is a combination of the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, all in one. Learning to undress emotionally is being willing to be so vulnerable with your spouse completely and undress those emotions that you're feeling all the time. Um, Set aside time for fun. Make time where we can have fun, and take steps toward intimacy, which also includes all aspects of the emotional, physical, and spiritual. And allow love to work out in all areas of your lives. Allow love to lead and to guide you. The love and true love that you first learn from God, and apply that to your relationship and to your life together. And finally, the last area that he suggests is finally making that recommitment to one another, an every area of your life, saying no matter what comes, I have worked through this, and I'm making the choice today that I'm going to stay committed to this relationship. No matter what happens, no matter what comes, we are going to continually work through this together because I choose to love this person. I choose to be with this person. And so I hope I've given you, I know it's been a quick overview, and there's a lot more things that entail and work through the idea of the impact of a threat of marriage, or the impact of a threat divorce on a marriage. But I hope that I've given you a quick overview and some new insights or things to think about as we journey through this class together and explore all of those different areas of life that affect and contribute to a marriage. Thank you.